The ZFC has been responsible for a few shots in previous videos that you've seen, but we're going to take a more in-depth look at it. We're going to do this while we drive a lap of Burburan National Park, which is found about 120 kilometres south of Gladstone. It's one of the biggest remaining patches of largely untouched subtropical rainforest, and it's accessible only by four-wheel drive. I'm recording this adventure just on the ZFC. While we go around Burburan National Park, I'll tell you more about how it works, what makes it so different, and why. So the ZFC itself is basically just a Nikon Z50 mirrorless camera in a body designed to be strongly reminiscent of the Nikon FM film camera of the 1970s. This of course makes it way cooler, and gives you a lot more knobs and buttons than a modern camera has. Mirrorless though, what does that actually mean? Well, in a more traditional DSLR, there is a mirror in the optical path, which when the shutter's closed, reflects the image from the lens upwards into a matte glass screen which is viewed through the viewfinder. So this means that the viewfinder sees exactly what the lens is seeing, unlike rangefinder cameras which have an entirely separate optical path to show you through the viewfinder. The upside of the rangefinder approach is it's a lot simpler, you don't need the mirror. But the downside is that it gives you a slightly different view of the subject, especially if you're close up, and if you put filters over the lens you don't get to see how they affect the image. With the mirrorless camera there still is a viewfinder. When you look through the viewfinder though, your first thought is to realise that you're looking at a computer screen. The viewfinder's fake. Now that's one way of seeing it. But the end product is the images or video captured by the sensor, and in a mirrorless camera, what you're seeing through the viewfinder is the true view of what the sensor sees. You can adjust the exposure, the white balance, even set the camera to capture in black and white, and the view through the viewfinder will accurately reflect these. In actual fact, if anything's fake, it's the viewfinder of the DSLR. Now there's still some residual negative attitudes about this because the cheap point-and-shoot cameras have worked this way for quite a while now. But the technological issues that really prevented this from being suitable for higher-end cameras, they've been solved. Great advances in computing power have massively increased the resolution at which it's practical to do this, and greatly reduced the viewfinder delay to the point it's practically imperceptible. Nikon's actually gone all in on mirrorless, all the way from the low end up to their nearly $5,500 Z9. The upshot of which is smaller, lighter cameras with one major reduction in a significant moving part and a much more accurate viewfinder. So as we come into Burburan National Park, there are some small river crossings and some hill climbs up through clay soil. This of course wouldn't be easy in the wet. Though I do wish it would stop focusing on the dirt on the windscreen and focus on what's going on outside it. I'm going to switch to manual focus. So what's actually changed with mirrorless? Well, the lens mount for one. The F mount, which has remained pretty standard since 1959, with varying degrees of compatibility maintained since then, is out. The FTZ adapter allows you to mount F lenses on Z bodies. It contains no optical elements, just electrical adaptation and a mechanical servo for the aperture lever. It's got one big problem though. F-mount lenses, which depend on the screwdriver coupling for focus, won't autofocus on the adapter. This would be a little less of a problem if Nikon wasn't still selling such lenses brand new right now. Now I'm not going to call the adapter useless as others have, possibly because I am upgrading from a D40 which didn't autofocus on these lenses anyway. On the 50mm Nifty 50, although that's more like 75mm on APS-C, at f1.8 manual focus is a little bit fiddly. On the 10.5 fisheye I have, everything's pretty much in focus down to half a metre from infinity anyway. Till you get closer than that, then you need to focus in, but you really don't need to be that precise. So I've put the 18-200 on the FTZ and we'll see how that goes. The whole thing of course looks pretty huge once the rather thick FTZ adapter is added to it, but it has to be this thick because you must have the back of the lens at the same distance as the sensor as the lens was designed for. Unfortunately, the ZFC lacks in-body image stabilization. There is electronic image stabilization which attempts this in software, but my testing has found this to be largely unusable as it doesn't fully correct for rolling shutter or reproject the perspective of the image, which results in an image that just bends and warps all over the place. Now, playing with such a camera after having used the GoPro though, that really gives you an appreciation quite how good they've got the stabilization. So, the upshot of the 18-200, it might not really be the right lens to take video on. I thought the weight of the lens would make things more stable, but really it is hard to hold steady while you've got this off-road. As we come up to Avalok Lookout on the loop, this is pretty plainly obvious. What I think I should have done was put Nikon's brilliantly tiny 16-55 Z-mount lens on there instead. The short flange distance, which is the distance between the back of this lens and the sensor, makes making really small, tiny lenses like this a great deal more practical. The small rig L-grip certainly helps with the handling, and it actually solves one small issue which really bugs me. You can feel that the bottom of the camera isn't made out of metal like it looks, but the bottom of the small rig grip is, problem solved. So walking around, it is nice to have some zoom and depth of field, but this shot really illustrates another way in which the GoPro just seems to get it right. The exposure here just isn't what I want.
I think if there's one thing for sure here, the person who bulldozed this path into these hills did not know what all of those squiggly lines on the map mean.
A small issue with the 18-200 is that it's not a terribly quiet lens. It was never designed for video. So as things get darker, I've got another lens to try out. This one is the TT Artisan 17mm f1.4. With the advent of mirrorless cameras, we've had a lot of small Chinese manufacturers nobody's really heard of produce a lot of interesting manual focus wide aperture primes, and a few really interesting wide aperture hyperprime lenses. Now, this lens is a bit oddly shaped, and there exists almost no other 17mm lens with an aperture this big. It's entirely metal in construction, which is actually more than you can say for a lot of Nikon's lenses. And, having cost me only $160, it's actually pretty affordable. But is it any good? The focus distance you get seems to be quite a bit different to what's actually marked on the barrel. It's also not anything you'd really call sharp below about f2.8, especially in the corners. At f8 it's pretty acceptable though, but you don't buy a lens this wide to shoot at stop down, and this is a pretty good performer in low light, especially for video. Alright, so tilt up and pull focus. This looks pretty good. The low light ability of the ZFC combined with such a lens is impressive, at least compared to a GoPro which starts suffering noise due to low light, with low light for the GoPro being about when you take your sunglasses off. So Kubrick may have needed an ex-NASA f.7 hyperprime to shoot in candlelight, but that's actually only 2 stops faster than this lens. He was shooting on film stock that was high ISO for the time, ISO 100 pushed to 200, which is where the film is overdeveloped to make up for underexposing it. But with 2 stops less lens, we'd have to shoot at 800 to get the same results. On this camera, there's still barely any visible noise 1 step beyond that at 1600. 4 steps further on at 25-600, there's visible noise, but the footage is still quite usable. Isn't modern technology great? So the bokeh on that lens isn't great though, bordering on donut circles, but for the price. So in short, to sum up, it's a good camera and I'd recommend it. And it's a good national park, and I'd recommend it. For more adventures, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and see you next time. This has without a doubt got to be the weirdest camera setup I have ever used.